Sponsored by Kuhn Capital Partners in Naperville.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here, following up on that deadly attack on a synagogue, at a synagogue in Manchester late last week. 35-year-old Syrian whose name is Jihad. Two people were killed. A number of others were injured. One of those who died appears to be the victim of friendly fire. Police opened fire against the attacker to try to prevent him from getting inside the synagogue, and they accidentally shot two people, one of who died. We also find out that the attacker was on bail after a rape arrest. That reporting from the BBC. For more on this and the larger implications for British and Western European society, as well as the discussion about anti-Semitism and peace in the Middle East, we're pleased to be joined by Brendan O'Neill, who's the chief political writer at Spiked and the author of After the Pogrom, 7 October, Israel and the Crisis of Civilization. Brendan, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. So, give us sort of what additional background you think is important here with respect to this attack, and then put it in context of what's going on in the UK, particularly since Keir Starmer has made rhetorical overtures about tightening things up with respect to illegal immigration and removing people in the UK illegally, but I'm not sure that we've heard anything that would be considered a work product to support that rhetoric.
Yeah, I think this horrible attack really sums up all the problems facing modern Britain, because firstly, this is a family of people who came here from Syria. They were given citizenship. They were given somewhere to live. They were given jobs. The father of the killer worked for our health service. They did pretty well for themselves in this country. And yet then they turned around and their son turned around and carried out this heinous attack on the peaceful Jews of Manchester. Absolutely sickening. And, the signs were there in this family that this family was not integrated and was not quite right. I mean, the father worked as a doctor, but he praised 7th of October. He praised that horrific, the worst act of anti-Semitic violence since the Holocaust. He sang the praises of the men who carried that out. He named his son Jihad. I mean, the clue is in the name. There was a point where the BBC was saying we can't be sure what the man's motive was. His name was Jihad, and he went to kill Jews. I think we can be pretty sure.
Yeah, see if we can piece this together, right?
Yeah, I think it's not that difficult. So it sums up the problems we face in this country, which is an absolute, not even a crisis of integration, but a complete collapse of integration, to such an extent that even the people we welcome into our country and provide with resources and a nice life, even they can turn around and be radicalized and be extremists and carry out the most heinous assaults on our citizens here, our Jewish citizens. So it really sums up that problem, and it shines a light on the issue of anti-Semitism in Britain, which has been growing exponentially since the 7th of October. It really has exploded, and this attack, I think, is horrific and shocking, but I have to say it's not surprising.
And just a little bit more context to this that I think is instructive, too, about larger English culture, or at least the political culture there. So the week prior, we had a autistic man arrested by British police officers, and this was videoed. The arrest was videoed, and the exchange between him and the officers, which is why this got such attention. He was arrested because he shared a meme the month earlier on X, which read F Hamas, F Palestine, F Islam, want to protest, F off to a Muslim country and protest. This is an activist who has autism and Tourette's. This image generated hundreds of thousands of views, getting the attention of North Yorkshire officers who confronted this gentleman and his wife as a, quote, hate team, having concluded there are offenses there we need to explore, and there are concerns that he was spreading racial hatred. Now, that's, not the most appropriate language to communicate something substantive. I concede the point. But the idea that police rally to arrest this guy who shows really no indication of violence and there's no background here. And this guy, as you were saying, in terms of what we know about him, including the fact that he was on bail for rape, and the police are sort of nowhere to be found, or they're looking, they take a blind eye, or they take no interest in people that are posting and suggesting things that are very intemperate, if not outright violent, in the direction of Jews.
Yeah, absolutely right. In Britain, we currently have a government that is both tyrannical and incompetent. And that's a very lethal combination.
Indeed.
It's one minute they're like Big Brother from 1984. The next minute they're like the Keystone Cops. I mean, it's just from one ridiculous extreme to another. And the fact of the matter is we have a police forces across the UK who now seem more interested in policing tweets rather than policing the streets. And that's a serious problem. They get all excited about knocking on people's doors if they've said something untoward on the internet or made a rude joke or said something that the police think is racist or misogynistic, whatever. They are very happy to go around knocking on those people's doors and in some cases actually arresting them. And they don't seem capable of keeping an eye on the growth of Islamic extremism and the fact that there are significant numbers of people in our midst who are not only saying anti-Semitic things, but planning anti-Semitic acts. So the state is really letting us down on all fronts. It's interfering where it's not welcome, which is in the realm of speech, and it's not doing enough in the realm where it should be very active, which is, terrorism and racist violence and so on. But the truth of the matter is that, there have been these protests against Israel every weekend in this country since the 7th of October for the past 2 years. And they have been, I'm afraid to say, orgies of anti-Semitism. There has been open anti-Semitism on those demonstrations. People have chanted for the return of the army of Muhammad to come and kill all the Jews. People have compared Jews to Nazis. They have screamed about destroying the Jewish state. Now, I'm a free speech fundamentalist, so I don't want those people arrested either.
Right.
But isn't it extraordinary that the police will turn a blind eye to visceral expressions of Jew hatred and then feel someone's collar and take them in for questioning because they say F Hamas? I mean, that is the real skewing of moral priorities in this country.
I wanted to get your reaction to something Starmer said, the prime minister there said last week in rolling out the new digital ID that's going to come online. Mandatory digital ID, for emphasis there, mandatory digital ID. This is the rationale, according to the Prime Minister.
And that is why today I am announcing this government will make a new free of charge digital ID mandatory for the right to work by the end of this Parliament. Let me spell that out. You will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have digital ID. It's as simple as that. Because decent, pragmatic, fair-minded people, they want us to tackle the issues that they see around them. And of course, the truth is, we won't solve our problems if we don't also take on the root causes, looking upstream to tackle poverty, conflict.
This is in part being sold as a way to, ensure that British citizens, are prioritized, that people here illegally in the UK can't work because they can't get a digital ID because we'll vet them. But many have commented, including Konstantin Kisin. He writes this: a digital ID has nothing to do with immigration. Britain currently has up to 1 million illegal immigrants. Many, if not most, are known to the authorities, and yet they're still here. The reason they're here is not that we can't identify them, the problem digital ID is supposed to solve. The problem is that we won't deport them even when we know who they are. This is not about immigration. It is about building control infrastructure. It's what Blair tried and failed to push through 20 years ago. Imagine governments which routinely arrest people for jokes and memes, lock people in their homes for during COVID, and think half the country is far right to have these tools at their disposal. What say you, Brendan?
Yeah, I really agree with Konstantin's points on that. It's disastrous. And, we have a situation now where the government can't police the borders, so instead it's going to police us, the people. That's really what's happening. It's the complete, the failure of the government to control our borders is extraordinary. It's not that difficult. We're an island nation. We're not that big. The vast majority of these illegal immigrants are coming over on small boats into a county called Kent. We know where they come. We know the beaches they wash up on. We know what part of France they're coming from. And we still can't do anything to stop them or to send them back or to say, I'm sorry, you don't have permission to come to this country, therefore you need to go away. Britain used to be a great naval force. We used to be, controller of the seas, and now we can't even stop a boat full of men from Eritrea or Ethiopia or Afghanistan turning up. And just to give your listeners a sense of what's happening, around 750 men, mostly men, are turning up on these boats every single day. That is a lot of people to be bringing into a country every single day. We don't know who they are. They very often don't have papers. They come from regressive cultures, misogynistic cultures, anti-Semitic cultures, and we're bringing in 750 approximately every day. We're putting them up in 4-star hotels. We're giving them food, bed and board, because under the Refugee Convention, that's what we have to do, even as certain British citizens, British-born people, are going hungry or struggling to make rent. So the whole thing is a complete disaster, and people are incredibly angry about it. And the idea that digital ID will fix this problem is completely laughable. As Konstantin says, there are already people in this country who are here illegally. They already work illegally. The idea that they will suddenly start following the rules just because we bring in digital ID is preposterous. The truth is, this government hasn't got the wherewithal to kick these people out of the country, and so it's going to punish all of us by making us get these ID cards. It's really disgraceful.
And so, going back to what I asked at the opening, the evidence, the answer sounds overwhelmingly clear, which is that Starmer is making noise in the direction of sort of putting British citizens first, if I could borrow a phrase. But he's not serious about it. It's just that it's rhetorical overtures that are intended to misdirect and create misunderstanding about what his actual interest is, or Labour Party's actual interest, which is that control infrastructure that Konstantin Kisin referenced.
Yeah, the issue is that Starmer is the worst prime minister we could have at this very moment in time, and there's a reason he is the most unpopular prime minister of modern times, according to all the polls. It's because ordinary people in Britain are crying out for tougher border controls. They don't want an end to immigration. They're quite happy with the idea that people should come to Britain to work and whatever, but they want controls on immigration. They don't want 900,000 people a year, which is what happened last year. 900,000 people came to this country, which is a population the size of Leeds, and Leeds is a pretty big city in the north of England. They don't want that. That's unsustainable. But Starmer is the worst person to be able to tackle any of this, because his background is he's a human rights lawyer. He's very much in the globalist club. He once said he prefers going to Davos, the World Economic Forum in Davos. He prefers that to Westminster. So he prefers to rub shoulders in clink glasses with the gold-collared superclass, rather than to have to represent his stupid little constituents in Westminster. He's a man who doesn't like borders, thinks nationhood is an outdated idea, believes that human rights law should trump domestic law, should trump democratic law, and he was against Brexit. He's in favour of the European Union. He is not cut out for the task at hand, because the task at hand, the thing that people are crying out for, is the restoration of British sovereignty. exactly what people are crying out for in America. They're not crying out for a complete closure of the borders or, to freeze us off from the rest of the world, but they want a restoration of our sovereignty. They want us to know who's coming here, to control who's coming here, and to have authority over our borders. That's not too much to ask for, but it's not something that Starmer is capable of delivering.
Well, and it's something they've been clamoring for ever since Brexit, it seems to me. I know Conservatives were a huge disappointment, and so they got punished at the ballot box. But what happens now? It doesn't seem like anything has changed in terms of the general attitude of the British electorate over the last decade. They just can't seem to find anybody who really wants to represent their interests other than perhaps Nigel Farage. What happens here? Are we going to see strong leadership emerge in Britain or some other Western European nation that gets more serious about attaching some results to some of this patronizing rhetoric?
I think so, yes. The populist spirit has not gone away. I mean, it really started with Brexit. Brexit was a real turning point. And I hope I don't sound too Anglo-centric when I say that I think Brexit even inspired the rise of the Trump movement in America, and it certainly inspired the rise of populist movements across Europe, because it was a complete shock to the political system when people of Britain said no to the European Union, when we voted to leave the European Union. No one expected that to happen. The political class was completely horrified. It was an earthquake in modern European politics. And the idea that hunger for a more serious democracy and for people to be treated properly, the idea that hunger would just disappear and we would all go back to nodding along to our technocratic ruling class, that is a complete fantasy. That populist desire is still out there, and that's one reason lots of people are turning towards Nigel Farage, as you say, and his party, Reform UK. There's even talk that they could win a majority at the next election, that Farage could be Prime Minister. I mean, it's not impossible, and if it were to happen, it would be the biggest shock in British politics since we got the franchise 100 years ago. It would really be a revolution in politics in this country, and that's how much people are really annoyed with the technocratic rulers, the globalist system, the post-borders ideology, the post-nation ideology, the entire edifice of wokeness. They are sick and tired of all of it, and they're willing to take a punt on Farage if he promises to dismantle some of this stuff.
Brendan O'Neill is the chief political writer at Spiked Online, author of After the Pogrom, 7 October, Israel and the Crisis of Civilization. Brendan O'Neill, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Brendan joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
You okay down there?
I tripped over old china boxes in the basement, and now I'm stuck behind the ping pong table.